So, how are you?
Fine, very well indeed, very well.
Excellent. So, what I thought would be quite interesting would be to just tread through a little bit of your sort of singing history first, because it's quite an interesting one. So, the first thing that most people seem to cite about you is that you were a choral scholar at King's.
Yeah.
But presumably you had some music education before that, because I think it's quite interesting to see how people end up there, because it's not either the easiest place to get into, nor does it offer the most sort of straightforward music to somebody. So you played trumpet, I think.
I actually I was a chorister at King's as well.
Ah, right.
So I got form. I understood what was needed, and benefited from the extraordinarily, really, really wonderful music education at King's Choir School, along with all the other education. But I played the fiddle, piano, and very, very badly. And then when I went to big school, I picked up the French horn, which I absolutely loved. And it was a sort of toss-up, actually, in the end, between singing and being a horn player. Such was my immediate love of the French horn. But I think I always deep down knew that I was a bit of a show-off, or a considerable show-off, and decided that singing, I don't know. I mean, I think we all respond, as musicians, we all respond to music in one way or the other. And I responded with the French horn. I loved it, but I think singing just made my body sing, and I enjoyed it enormously, and was lucky enough to get that choral scholarship to King's, and that's when it all, as it were, all started.
So you were singing, of course, then your voice broke.
Yeah.
Did you stop, or did you sing through? Because that's a big issue these days as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, people said, "Oh, you've got to be very careful when your voice breaks. You really shouldn't sing too much." But I got a music scholarship to the school that I went to, so it was actually incumbent on me, really, to turn up and sing alto for, I don't know, about 20 minutes. And then I think I had to try to squeak out some tenor, because I mean, typically in a boys' school, there aren't any tenors. So so it's left to those people who perhaps can just force it out. So actually, you say, did I spend any time letting my voice settle? I think the answer is probably no. I mean, I think luckily I went from alto to tenor. I mean, this is really days. I think I had about a week trying to sing tenor, and then it all, the bottom fell out of my voice, and I ended up, singing bass. So.
Yeah. Interesting. I think I do think that that instrumental background could be incredibly helpful for singers, though. And I mean, aside from the choristry, it does give you a different sort of approach to music.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it helps with the sort of the collective appeal of singing. In that, in an orchestra, of course, you're learning to listen to other instruments. You're learning to read music, to transpose, to breathe. I mean, I suppose that there is a correlation, of course. I mean, it's slightly different, the breath control for a French horn and trumpet and singing, but the idea is the same. So I mean, I think one certainly does help the other, and I think, having been a chorister, it meant that I knew a lot of the repertoire. that we would then sing as a as a male grown-up singer. So it wasn't unfamiliar to me, put it like that. And we didn't have, in those days, we didn't have things like, the what are they called, Eton choir courses or whatever they're called. You're just shoved in the deep end. You turned up on an October morning and were told to go and sing in the chapel. And of course, you see, for me, that wasn't a big problem, because I knew the acoustic, I knew the choir master, I knew the ropes. So I was very lucky. And
that was a good experience for you. You think that was a good experience vocally, musically, certainly, probably, but vocally as well?
At King's?
Yeah.
No, well, I mean, I didn't ruin my voice, but I learned how to, the most important thing when you're in that sort of choir is to learn to blend and to learn to submerge your ego for the greater good of the choral sound. And I mean, sometimes I think that discipline one of the most exciting things that I've ever experienced. When you probably have it with Opus 48 all the time. There are lots of nodding heads in the background that we can't see going, oh yes, we have that every week. Oh, yeah. And it's just that ability to listen to the person sitting next to you or standing next to you and the people in front of you and thinking, how can I best serve this noise around me, rather than thinking I can't hear myself and myself is the only person that's really important. And I remember singing a lot of male voice stuff, actually. I mean, I know that sounds silly, but when I countertenor, tenor, and bass, so sort of 3-part stuff. I think some of the most extraordinary experiences, really riveting experiences I've had, was just singing, I don't know, Tallis Lamentations. We used to do that every Easter. Miserable piece. Wonderful. And I just remember it being a really, really exciting part of the sort of vocal year. But I can't say that from the soloist point of view, that singing in King's is any good for you, because as soon as you leave, you have to try to undo all those habits that you acquire singing in that building, and especially with that choir.
Yeah, interesting. And so then you went into Harvey and the Wallbangers.
Yeah.
And so that when you were at King's, were you thinking, oh, I want to be a singer, or were you thinking, or were you thinking, oh, I'll do that sort of classic King's thing of go down and singing and become a professional chorister, and then this just came out of the blue, and it was quite an unusual step, would it?
Yeah, you could say that. I don't know, David. I think I was going to say I'm a bit of a follower. If someone suggests something, I'll go, yeah, okay, yeah, right, yeah, I'll give it a crack. I'm open to persuasion. I think that's probably the kindest I can be to myself. And so when someone said to me, Harvey, as of Harvey and the Wallbangers, said, hey, we've heard you in a couple of things at university. Would you be interested in joining the band? I said, yeah, I can think of no reason why not. It was something I think, fed up of singing in choirs. I think I was fed up of being told what to do, frankly, by chorus masters. And I just wanted a different experience. And I knew that singing in this band would give me that. And for the band, I took up the trumpet. We all sang, we all hit things. It was quite a sort of all singing, all dancing group. So it suited me. It suited me down to the ground. It really did. And actually, I think what it did, it sort of refreshed my love of performing. Because up till then, when you're in a choir, and you have a fairly I don't know, fairly large ego, it is quite difficult. It is quite difficult to suppress your natural urge. And I think that I'd suppressed it for however long, I don't know, 7, 10 years or something like that. And I was just fed up of it all, and I just wanted to be free. And this, the Harvey Wallbangers, seemed to me to be freedom with a very big F.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And so that lasted for about 5 years. And then,
do you think actually it was? I mean, apart from the performing aspect, which I can totally get, and also learning to perform in a slightly different way and with great regularity. Do you think it actually also just allowed you vocally to get a bit away from King's? And also, you know, there's nothing wrong with going into opera singing a few years later.
No, I mean, I think you're right. I think it also, I think it gave me a chance to mature emotionally a little bit. I think a lot of the kids that I teach from time to time, either at the Royal Northern in Manchester or at the Royal Academy in London, I just think they're too young. I think they've done, you know, they're wonderful musically, technically pretty proficient at the age of 24, you know, much, much, much more than I am even now. And they just haven't really lived very much. So the level of sort of imagination isn't particularly high. And that's something that I value, I think, more than anything else. Okay, look, we all have to have a vocal technique. I understand that, of course we do. But it's what you do with it. It's how you prepare yourself for the task ahead. So, you know, if you're taking any song or an aria, you know, what can you bring to that hasn't already been said 100,000 times? And I think that's where they sometimes fall down, because they haven't experienced a huge amount of life. And I suppose the one good thing about being in a rock and roll band is that you do experience quite a lot. And the thing, but also, I mean, I think you're also right that I think it was a freeing. It was something that freed me from the strictures of King's, for instance, or singing in choirs.
Yeah. So that sort of leads me on to a thought I often toy with, which is, what is the difference vocally for you between being a good chorus? Because you sang in a few other choirs. Did you sing at 16 and stuff, or was that only as a solo?
That's when the Wallbangers finished, when we all parted company, just to earn money. I went back into choir singing. So I sang with the 16, with the Monteverdi choir, with sometimes the Tallis Scholars, with Andrew Parrott's Taverner choir, Paul McCreesh's, whatever they're called, Gabrielli's. And I loved it. You know, actually going back into choir singing, having had time out, as it were, was wonderful. And I very much enjoy it. I mean, it's an easy life. You know, if you can sight read, which I could, and if all you're there for really is to sing all the low notes, it's a piece of piss. It really was. I mean, that's what I felt. It was just like sort of stepping back into a slightly more grown-up choir atmosphere, and the people are gorgeous. Such lovely people.
But it's interesting though, because in fact, not huge numbers make the leap from that into being top soloists. It's not that. And what would you say, you know, people need? What are the differences? What do you think that, you know, that actually you needed to work on most to get out of that, and for people to take you seriously as a soloist?
Well, actually, it was to find my proper voice. I mean, I think I said, you know, that the thing about being in a choir is that, for the most part, what you're doing is you're using probably not all your voice. You're using the voice that blends nicest with the people around you, and that gets you a job. frankly. If you're looking at the bottom line, and someone says, "Oh, I really like it when you sing like that," you go, "Oh, what do I do? I better sing like that," even though it's not necessarily the way forward. And the way forward for me, it was quite a sort of tortuous experience, in that I could hear my, in inverted commas, solo voice. I could hear the voice that would allow me to sing opera and to sing out the front, as it were, and to sing soloistically. But I just didn't have the wherewithal to find that path. And it was almost, I remember when I was very young, I had a lazy eye. I was one of those boys in the primary school playground with a patch on my eye, wearing glasses with a patch. It's a really good look. And I just remember going to the ophthalmologist, or what are they called, eye doctor, and having to do this extraordinary thing where you look into an eyepiece, and you've got to get the lion into the cage, and you've got to use X and Y, as it were. That's basically all you've got. And I think you did one eye first and then the other, and I lined it up beautifully with my right eye, which is my good eye. No, the other way around. My left eye was good eye, and the lion was in the box. And then I changed eyes. It was like sort of miles away, and that's how I felt. That's how it felt to me, trying to find my voice. And I went to singing lesson. I went to teacher after teacher to try to, I don't know, get some sort of idea of a technique so that I could get to this place that I knew my voice was. And eventually I found it, Eureka. But that was when I was like, 30 or something. Mm. So if you think that most kids coming out of college, they've already got 6 years on me, as it were, and they've probably won prizes. They're the star pupil of the academy or the college. So people are really rooting for them, and already, in certain circles, they're a sort of star in the making. And I was right at the bottom of the ladder, still, still sort of searching around, scrabbling around, trying to find this voice. And eventually I got there. And actually, interesting enough, it was Anthony Rolfe Johnson, sainted man, who recognized from listening to certain aspects of the Monteverdi choir, and he could tell that my voice was sounding good, and he encouraged me to come out the front. He said, "Look, you can carry on doing this stuff in the choir, in the Monteverdi choirs, the 16, but actually you're too good for that. You need to be out the front. You need to look after yourself. You need to start to take yourself seriously, and really work on your voice." And he sent me to his teacher, wonderful lady called Diane, who used to teach a lot of really good singers like Catherine Wynne Rogers, John Mark Ainsley, and Tony himself, a lot of really, really interesting singers. And it made me start, thinking, look, I can do this. And just gradually, I gained confidence and gained a sort of technique that I could use. I started getting little solo work, 200 quid in Telford, something like that, singing Elijah or whatever it might be, and just gained experience.
So it's a sort of, it's a sort of personal journey as well as a technical journey, really.
Totally, though, totally, absolutely. And all that time, I was sort of emotionally growing up as well, allowing myself, it's a sort of psychological thing that I'm sure a lot of people in your choir and a lot of people in choirs, they understand it. A lot of people sing in choirs because they just love to sing. And a lot of people also, it's like a little stepping stone. Little by little, you gain more confidence and you allow yourself to start thinking, do you know what? I think I could do this. And that was certainly how I felt. And then that giant leap, when you say to yourself and you say to other people, I can't sing in this choir anymore because it's not the singing I should be doing. And suddenly you go from, I don't know, 30 grand a year and not really having to work terribly hard for that, to 10 grand a year, slogging it out, all around the country, for 150 here, 200 quid there, sleeping in your car and all that sort of stuff. But somehow the psychological step has to be made. And that's really, really, really important.
Yeah, because you also went from bass to baritone, really, didn't you? I mean, when you were very much a sort of like knock out the bottom and all that, which is not what you're seeing now.
No, what happened was that I remember being with said Diane Falano, and I remember taking along another bass aria, and I said, Diane, if I have to sing much more of this bass repertoire, I think either I'm going to kill myself or I'm just going to stop singing, whichever is hurts less. And she said to me an extraordinary thing. She said, well, I've never heard you as a bass. I thought, hey, but I've got all the low notes and all that. And she said, yeah, but that's not who you are. That's not what you are. And I said, listen, in your dreams, love, I would love to be a baritone, but I can't even get above an E, an F for me in the sort of bass clef was I'd need a big following wind and having slept for, I don't know, a week before, not drunk anything. I mean, it was just impossible. It was like, that was a dream. And she said, okay, well, look, let's sing something. And I said, what, you mean sort of baritone rep? And she said, yeah, do you know anything? And I said, well, funnily enough, I've just been in Ballo in Maschera at Welsh National Opera, and I was singing one of the, what are they called, the Conspirators. And I was listening to the baritone and thinking, well, there's, a couple of wonderful arias. And I thought, well, why don't I have a crack at one of those? At least I knew, I sort of knew itch. And we went through it, and it was a bit sort of crap. But there were a couple of notes that we both looked at each other. She was playing the piano, I was obviously singing, and I thought, God, that's good. God, that was fantastic. And when you get that feeling, you see it in children, when they don't want to smile about having done something really rather well because they've been told not to show off or anything like that. So they go, and there's that sort of slightly pursed lips attitude. But I couldn't keep it up. I was smiling all over my face. And my whole body was like sort of zinging from this extraordinary feeling that actually she was bang on, that I wasn't a bass. I do have the low notes, but if I really worked hard, I could find myself going up a notch. So I went from bass to, I think, what they call basso cantante. Sounds nice. That just basically means, I think, baritone without the top. And and then gradually to baritone. And I had to work really, really hard. But interestingly enough, the higher I went in tessitura, the lower I went. So let's say my range originally as a bass was E to bottom D, and sometimes a C. It then went to top A, tenor top A, to bass bottom A. So I had this 3-octave range that I had no idea what to do with, but I was so excited because it opened an awful lot of doors for me. And it also made me incredibly excited because psychologically, you know, I think basses are always, you know, they seem to be a little bit sort of, you know, stepping back on the back of their heels, as it were, slightly self-satisfied sound. Whereas I was much more on my tippy tiptoes, wanting to, you know, find out what was going on and get involved, as it were. So so you're right. Yeah, I was a bass, but then worked incredibly hard and pushed myself, hoped myself up to the glory notes.
So now if you like, you've lived with this voice for 25 or say years.
Yeah.
What do you still get that sort of visual thrill when you're singing some of this stuff? And what, you know, if you're going into a new piece, a new role, a new song, whatever it is, you know, what are you thinking about? What are you aiming for? Because you don't want to mess too much with the sound, presumably, but you do, you know, you're using different aspects of it. I mean, what's your sort of way into music? What do you think is the thing that would sort of mark out one of your better performances?
Well, for me, I very rarely think about anything as a singer. I don't think, oh, that'll suit my voice. Do I? I'm not sure. Yeah, for me, it's about communicating a story. It's first and foremost about communicating a story. And so, yeah, look, I learned the stuff. I learned the language. I learned all the notes and all that stuff. But that's, for me, that's where it starts. So it's all about telling a story with your voice. And I try to do it as much as possible, for good or bad, in the same way that we would tell a story to our children, or we tell a story to friends, basically, as I'm doing now. And I would try to use the same sort of inflection. I would try to use the same mannerisms. I would try to use the same articulation. I would try to use the same mode of speech, so that it becomes a story. It doesn't become a series of notes or an aria. You know, an aria, for me, when I go to the opera and I hear someone sing an aria, I'm asleep, I'm bored, and I'm really frustrated. And I just want to get up and shout and say, for God's sake, tell me the story. Don't just sing the notes. Don't go back into your you know, your vocal training room, your workspace, and sing the aria, because that's not interesting. So for me, I tend to get the roles that allow you to tell the story and allow you to put yourself into the character. And I know it's a sort of buzzword, you know, live the character, but actually that's what I try to do. I try to imagine what it must be to be that person and say the words, and just say the words. I happen to be singing the words, but I'm inside, I'm just saying them. Because in theatre, it seems to me, okay, you're much freer in theatre. You can shout in theatre. You can whisper in theatre. You don't have that constant beat. You don't have a bloke like you, David, going, come on, watch the beat, everyone. 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't have any of that. It's all you, yourself, and how you feel about the character and about the words that you are saying. It's a very interesting book by David Mamet that I'm sure lots of people have read. I think it's called True and False, or it could be True or False, but I know there's definitely a true and there's definitely a false in it. And he's really blunt about the way of communicating. You know, you have to trust that the playwright or the opera librettist has done his or her job. And there's nothing you can do about it, but you can interpret it if you want to. So in the same way that we can say something like, tomorrow I'm going to sing an aria. Okay, tomorrow, it's a simple phrase, tomorrow I'm going to sing an aria. Okay, most people will probably go, tomorrow I'm going to sing an aria. But you see, there's so many different ways you can say that. Tomorrow I'm going to sing an aria. Tomorrow I'm going to sing an aria. Tomorrow I'm going to sing an aria. You know, so within that just simple phrase, you can say it 4, 5 different ways. And I find a lot of singers just take the easy way out. You know, they just do it the way that their coach has said to do it. And that's not good enough for me. I have to try to find a different way. And sometimes it's a bit chaotic, sometimes it's horribly wrong, but it keeps me excited. So when what is my way into a role or into a character, it's just seeing what can I do with this, using my imagination. What sound could I make on that note? But sometimes it's not even that. It's just I'm saying the word, and that's the sound that comes out. And that's all I can do. I can't do it any other way. You know, and if it says piano, I go, well, sorry, love, it's going to be how it comes out, because that's how I feel. That's the way I feel it.
Yeah, I think that's really, and also I think that's so important for so many singers to hear that. So, I mean, with that in mind, I mean, I always think, you know, when I see you perform, that you seem to be genuinely enjoying what you're doing, which I think is, you don't see it across the board in opera, you know, and there are a lot of different reasons for that. But so would you say there's a role that you have really particularly enjoyed doing? And secondly, would you say there's a role that you have not sung yet that once COVID lifts, you are determined at some point to sing?
Well, okay, one of the really great roles that I've only sung once or twice was Beckmesser from Meistersinger. And Thomas Allen, the great Sir Tom Allen, once said of this role, it's like starting off at base camp and climbing to the top of Everest without oxygen. That's what it feels like to sing this role. And of course, you know, anyone that says that, I'm thinking, oh, I got to have a crack at that. I mean, I don't know whether I can sing it or not, but I'd like to think, oh, that sounds great. So that was a role that I really, really loved. It was the hardest, I don't know, 6 months of my life. I remember saying to Edwina, my wife, after a rehearsal, a particularly difficult rehearsal, and it was just me on my own. It was like some remedial class for the beginners. And you have to realize that singing Hans Sachs was Sabrin Turvel. So, I mean, you know, I was up in really exalted company. So I really had to, you know, pull my finger out. And I remember at this rehearsal, afterwards, I said to Edwina, I said, you know, I feel like I'm in a what do you call it, a field. I can see the 4 exits from this rectangular field, but I have no idea which exit to go, and I have no idea how to get there. And it was almost like staring me in the face, but I had no way of understanding what to do. And then I decided, okay, this is how you do it. You just play with it. and you obviously have to build up your stamina, because it's a heck of a role. One of the last notes Beckmesser sings is a 5-bar top A, a tenor top A, and that's after having been sort of farting about in Hans Sachs's studio and running here, running there. It's crazy, but it was so exhilarating. And that is a role that unfortunately, I was going to reprise it in October in Rome. And of course, that's one of the ones that's just, bitten the dust, which was really upsetting, but that's the way. I loved doing Saul at Glyndebourne, which was the first time I worked with Barry Kosky, the total genius of a stage director. And I remember saying to him at the beginning of a 6-week rehearsal, listen, Barry, I don't know what I'm going to be doing for 6 weeks, because I've got nothing to sing, nothing to say. And he said, I think we're going to find something for you to do. And, 6 weeks later, I was doing, cartwheels and anyway. And so those sort of roles that you have to immerse yourself, and you can't step back and sing an aria in your rehearsal room. You've got to be present all the time, every single second. It's shockingly hard work, but the most rewarding. There's that wonderful role that was actually written for me, which was written on Skin by George Benjamin. Again, that was a role that it's like someone gave me this text and said, go on, off you go, think about it and come back once you know what to do with it. And it was just the most liberating experience. Again, horribly hard work, but liberating. Once COVID comes, once we say goodbye to those little germs, I would love. There are 2 roles. One I want to revisit, and the other one I would give most of my teeth in order to be able to sing. So the first one I'd like to revisit is Scarpia from Tosca. I love baddies. I think I'm quite good at baddies. And I would just love to sing that. I think it would be great to do. And the other one is to sing Rigoletto. There's something about, I have a daughter. There's something about Rigoletto that is just mind-numbingly brilliant. And I think that those 2 roles I'd love to do. I mean, I am actually in a very fortunate position, because provided that we can get rid of these nasty germs and all those brilliant people in Oxford can come up with a vaccine, I'm doing Falstaff, 2 ring cycles, and something else. Oh, Sweeney Todd. So I'm sitting enormously.
You're right.
Well, I'm not very pretty, but I'm sitting.
That's awesome. Just a couple of little things that I just thought about. What would you say are best and worst aspects of being an opera singer?
Well, obviously, the best is you're doing something that makes, it makes sense of who you are. I mean, you've got to be a little bit weird to want to stand up in front of 2,000 or 3,000 people and expose yourself to them. I mean, it's a weird experience. But once you've conquered that, I think if you're in the right role and you've got all the right people around you, directing you either as a conductor or as the director himself, and everyone around you is doing their jobs as well as you possibly can, that is the best feeling. It really is the most fantastic feeling. And the worst, of course, is just being away. I've spent 4 months, I was saying to the family, I have 3 children, a wife, dog, cat, I don't know. And we were all saying, this is extraordinary. We have been together for, on and off, for 3.5 months, all the time. We've gone walking together, we cook together, we chat together, we play cards, you know, we do all the sort of things that normal families do on a very regular basis. In fact, probably all the time. And this is the first time, I'm 58, this is the first time I've really been able to do that. And so, in a way, thank you, COVID. But we've had enough now. Go on, bugger off. But the thing is, you know, I've enjoyed my time enormously. I'm so lucky. I'm so lucky because, you know, I have a wonderful family. And I every morning I'm up and I'm out with the dog for 2 hours.
Could be worse. So last really silly one. I years and years ago, I did a masterclass with Ellie Ameling.
Oh, yeah.
And people are always asking the same question. And her answer was, you should drink cold, sweet tea. Do you have any tip or special fad by which you recommend, or are you just like, you're a straight down the line, this is you know, I do this anyway, I don't need any of that stuff?
God, that's really interesting. I am actually straight down the line. I drink water. I mean, how boring is that? I've come across people, especially Americans, it has to be said, who travel with this box of pills for this, for that. You know, if you say, oh, my left big toe is really giving me jip, oh, I've got just the thing. And they'll come up with, you know, shaky pill box and say, take a couple of these, and this is what you need. Go to the chemist and you'll be able to get it over the counter. You know, I go, something like that. Go, oh, right. Now, what was that? Was that just an allergy, or do you think that's something else? Because I've got a rescue remedy, I've got this, and they go to their little, you know, pharmacy, portable pharmacy, and bring out, you know, this and that. I'm thinking, really? Do we need all? Sometimes I curse myself for not really taking care of myself. But I'm a big believer in if you have a cold, you take lots of vitamins and shut up and go to bed and drink as much water as you possibly can. I don't do anything else, you know, apart from, I think I may have had this COVID thing, but in January in Paris, which is weird because it hadn't really taken hold. But I went out to the market and bought myself chicken and 2 cloves of garlic, which I then just emptied into a pot. Chicken and then, you know, usual stuff, celery and, I don't know, pearl barley or whatever it was, and worked my way through this pot of chicken soup, along with as many vitamins as I could pour down my throat, as much water as I could. And within 2 or 3 days, I was back, and actually I could perform. So I don't know. Cold sweet tea, no. I mean, that wouldn't do it for me.
But chicken soup, on the other hand.
Chicken soup, well, I mean, you know,
there it is.
If I were Jewish, then you know, my grandmother would be smiling at me from heaven, saying, "Well done, my boy." I don't know. I mean, I don't do fads. I like to keep things as uncomplicated as possible, because I think psychologically, if you start having to rely on something else, another party, to get you better, then you know, then you're losing some of your core strength, I think. I mean, maybe I'm talking a load of old bollocks, but who knows?
Well, on that note, it's been I know that there may be a few questions. Oh. If you were to sing in front of the choir, what piece would you choose?
Okay, it's a show-off piece, right? And it's by Handel, and it encompasses my three octaves. Okay, and it goes. It's about a 6 or 7 minute aria, and it's one of the most beautiful arias that Handel ever wrote. And he didn't really write very many beautiful ones for the bass, baritone, tenor, or whatever it is. But it's the most wonderful, and it's called Fra l'ombre gli orrori. That's what I'd sing.
And is that on your disc, your Handel disc?
Do you know, it is on my Handel disc.
Oh, there you are. Do you have any superstitions, like, you know, you have to, just before going on stage, you have to scratch your right ear, or no? Excellent.
No,
good to hear.
I think it's a bit like, for me, it's a bit like, I don't have any food fads or liquid fads. I try to avoid anything to do with superstitions, because there's always going to be an occasion when you can't do something. You've forgotten your favorite socks or your favorite earring or whatever it might be. So I leave all that to other people.
What has been your favorite venue?
Venue to sing in. My favorite venue. Usually the favorite venue comes with either a wonderful performance from my point of view. So I would say it was either, if I'm allowed to have two, La Scala, La Di Da, and I found the Maria Callas hotspot. So just elbowing everybody else out of the way, I managed to I mean, that's an extraordinary place to sing anyway. And the other one was actually in New York, and it was in a crappy acoustic, but the performance, the concert was just electric. And it was Rheingold, and I was singing Albrecht, and it was with the New York Phil. I mean, it was absolutely, it was incredible for me. So
now that is a good note to end on, I have to say. And all the best, all the stuff coming up. Really great to talk to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being so generous with your kind thoughts. Thank you.